Of course not. We're not going to jip Obama. We're not going to join Obama's speech. What do you mean, are we going to jip Obama? Jip means join in progress in broadcast lingo. No, we're not going to do that. We're rolling tape on it. And if there's anything newsworthy in there, we'll say it. You want to make a bet whether he mentions the word Trump or not? Say he doesn't. I think he wants to go there. We'll see, though. Anyway, greetings, my friends. Welcome. Hope you had a great weekend. Rush Limbaugh here, ready and rocking and rolling for broadcast excellence. 3 hours straight ahead. The telephone number is 800-282-2882. If you want to appear on the program as a caller, if so, remember, the purpose of calls and callers is to make the host look good. But that doesn't mean that you call in and just consistently praise me. What that means is that callers are supposed to inspire and ignite the host into further area of inquiry and expertise. And that's what we look for. If you want to send an email, you can do that, lrushbo@eibnet.us. Okay, now, folks, I need to beg your indulgence here at the beginning for a couple of things. We're going to get into everything that's in the news out there today. The French election, particularly, you might think, well, come on, what do we need? You'd be amazed at the similarities, demographically, structurally, politically, what's happening in France and in the United States. And you're going to be amazed at the political coalitions that have sprung up in France that in many ways mirror exactly what's happening in the United States. The big difference is that Marine Le Pen is not Donald Trump. And the guy that came in number one in the runoff, Macron or Macroni or whatever his name is, do you know that his wife is 25 years older than he is? He met her. He was a student at age 15. And some teacher of his, well, they got married. She's 25 years older. She's 64, he's 39, or something like that. He'd be the youngest president, prime minister, premier, whatever they call him, dictator of France. I'm just joking about dictator. But if he wins, he's going to be the youngest ever. But the establishment in France lost, which is it's kind of, you have two anti-establishment candidates running there, Marine Le Pen and this guy. This guy edged her out by 2 points, 23% of the vote. She got 21. The experts are all saying it's over then. He wins the runoff on May 7th. Not so sure about this. And by the way, Obama called this guy Macron and weighed in and helped him, and Macron turned a phone call into a campaign ad. I thought the Democrats were opposed to foreign intervention in elections. Ladies and gentlemen, on the French election, I'm going to get to it in due course. I've spent a lot of time, I don't know why, over the weekend, I wanted to find out about this. In most cases, you learn enough to be able to be conversant in it, but I wanted to find out what this was really going on because I wanted to get beyond the American media coverage of this and find out what the real truths on the ground are in France about this election. Because I just don't trust the media. I just don't. Everything is written through the prism of how it can hurt Trump, how it can help Obama, how it can help the Democrat agenda. For example, what I'm talking about is this. Macron, the young wonderkin that's supposed to be the next leader of France, is described as a moderate centrist independent. That's how he is constantly referred to in the American media. Marine Le Pen, who would be, for our purposes here, the Donald Trump comparison, is always referred to as the extremist right-winger. Every drive-by article about the French election describes Emmanuel Macron as an independent centrist and Marine Le Pen as an extreme right-winger. Now, let me tell you, the only reason, and I want you to file this away for later in the program, and I circle back to the French election, because there are things here I want to get to first, but I just want to get a little foundation built here. The only reason that Emmanuel Macron is pretending to be a centrist is because his real party is the Socialist Party, which is the American, it's a Democrat party there. But it is so unpopular. The Socialist Party in France is so unpopular that Francois Hollande, the current president and socialist, didn't dare run for re-election. 50% of the electorate is opposed to the European Union. You will never learn that when you watch coverage of the election from Saturday in France or Sunday. You will think that because this guy won, that France is going to reject Brexit and wants to go all in on a unified Europe, and it's not the case. So what happened here is that Emmanuel Macron left the Socialist Party. He is a socialist. He is the equivalent of an American Democrat. He started his own party, of which he's the only member, just to ditch the baggage that would accrue to him of being in the Socialist Party. And so he is characterized as a moderate centrist, and when he's not, he's an ultra left-wing rabid socialist. So when I saw that kind of mischaracterization, misdirection, and cover-up, I wanted to dig deep and find out what's going on. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to be stunned when you find out how similar things are in France, demographically, culturally, politically. And you're going to find some of it is going to blow your mind. But let me give you one little tidbit. In the middle of the 20th century, France built a lot of public housing. And it was, half the population was to live in this public housing. It was 5 million units of public housing, which is now 1/6 of all households in France. 5 million public housing units, 1/6. It's ugly. It is hideous looking, but it is more or less affordable. But it was originally built for the working class of France, the white working class. They are gone. They don't live in this public housing. It is all Muslim now. The white working class has been rejected by the French Democrat Party, just as Obama rejected the white working class here. It's stunning. The Socialist Party in France has decided to do exactly what the Democrat, and I don't know who did it first. I'm not saying they're copying us. The Social Democrats, the Socialist Democrats in France, have decided on a coalition of immigrants and minorities everywhere they can find them. And the so-called white working class, which this public housing was built for, has been dispatched and is no longer part of the political coalition of the Socialist Democrats in France. It's identical to what the Democrats did here. That's just one similarity. So in time, we'll circle back to that. James in Lake Tahoe, great to have you on the program. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Rush. Thanks a lot. You know, you really nailed it during the first segment there, describing the French political scene. And it really is true that the way they are using the language in French, which I used to live in France, that the way that they describe Le Pen in the media, even in France, is as an extremist and so forth, and calling it a catastrophe that Le Pen might win, which is all fake, as you're saying. The only thing that Macron is saying that is typically what Democrats or socialists do, that is a conservative type of thing, is Macron is saying that he wants to lower taxes. But everything else is completely from the Democrat playbook. And even the slogan for Macron's political party, En Marche, means forward in French, just like forward for Hillary Clinton. It's the same slogan.
Was it forward or lean in? Oh, wait, lean in was Sheryl Sandberg.
There's different ways to translate it, but you would translate it as forward. I'm not sure Hillary's slogan, but the slogan En Marche would be forward or going forward.
Right.
The other thing is the leftists in France do not accept elections. The same thing that you've been saying over the past few weeks, they don't. There have been riots breaking out. They do not accept the elections. They take whatever they believe that they want to have, and they're going to keep on pressing for that no matter what.
Well, leftists are leftists, so wherever you go. It's not just, that's the point. of trying to explain this to people. You're right. It's not just in the United States that leftists behave as they do. It's worldwide, and it's all related to globalism. In France, this election, in many ways, was portrayed as globalism, which is great and wonderful, versus nationalism, populism, which is, of course, horrible. And it's short-sighted. Very, very, very bad for narrow. And the reason the argument is happening in France is the same reason that it's happening here. And that is the elites in France are doing very well. And the elites in France are benefiting and doing great because of their close attachments to the economic advances that are made possible by globalism. And there are some of those, but there are also very large downsides to it. And in France, as in the United States, the downsides to globalism is that native, in America, it's kind of a tough definition, but the beneficiaries of globalism in both the United States, the non-elite beneficiaries are illegal immigrants here and immigrants in France. And it's illustrated by the fact that 1/6 of public housing, 1/6 of housing in France is public, built by the government for French citizens. Now none of them live in it. It's all occupied by immigrants and primarily Muslims. And so these people have been displaced. They're French. They've been displaced. And they feel like they have been forgotten. They cannot afford to live in Paris because they can't work there. There's nothing for them. Since we had the phone call from the man who is intimately aware of the French situation with this election, let's get into it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I think you'll be fascinated with the similarities. What's happening in France, what's happening here. Not saying that they are copying us. It's just leftists are leftists wherever they go, and they are not people that respect nation states and borders and boundaries. They are actually, the leftists are the actual one-worlders, globalists, massive, gigantic, worldwide welfare state. It's insane, but that's largely what we're up against. Now, again, I just want to give you a brief explanation of terms so that you know who we're talking about. The two top vote getters are both considered outside the French establishment. In other words, neither a Republican nor a Democrat won, if you analogize it to the United States. But that's not altogether true. The top vote getter was Emmanuel Macron, who's 35, whose wife is 25 years older than he is. He met her when he was 15. She was a teacher. He was a student. He is a former member of the Socialist or Socialiste Party in France, which is so unpopular that the current president, François Hollande, did not even run for re-election. He's so unpopular, his party is so unpopular. So this guy, Emmanuel Macron, splintered from the Socialist Party and basically created his own party, and he's it. On the other side, he's referred to as a moderate centrist independent. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that just peachy? Isn't that so cute, cool, moderate, centrist, independent? What could possibly be bad or threatening about this little guy? Moderate, centrist, independent. Then, the equivalent to Trump, or conservative over there, is Marine Le Pen. And she is always referred to as the extremist right-winger. So you have the moderate centrist independent, Macron, versus the extremist right-winger, Le Pen. He gets 23% of the vote. She got 21%. Some people thought she would get more than that because of the ISIS attack and the terrorism there. And the stock markets around the world are going nuts. They're very relieved because this Macron guy loves the European Union, does not want to get out of it. No Brexit in France, nothing near it is what the experts are saying. They already have this guy elected. In their world, it's just a formality on May 7th, the next round of elections. This guy's going to walk away with it. Le Pen is going to be defeated again, and France is going to be saved as an arch-liberal state run by a moderate centrist independent. This takes us to NBC News and Richard Engel on the Today Show today. And a little comment here about the French presidential election. And Mr. Engel here is shocked because the French establishment was rejected. Neither of these two candidates are from the establishment, except Macron, for all intents and purposes, is, but he's not. I mean, his party, the party he left is. But we'll go with the fact that neither establishment candidate is in the runoff. And here's the shock and dismay.
French voters rejected the establishment, and the ruling parties that have governed in France for decades were thrown out. Emmanuel Macron is now the frontrunner to be the next French president. He faces his polar opposite, Marine Le Pen, from the far right. Le Pen is anti-immigration, wants out of the EU, to drop the euro, and has been taking a page from the strategy book of President Trump. It's time for the French people to be free of the arrogant elites, she said, promising to close borders and stop terrorism. Analysts say Macron has the clearest path to victory, and that following Trump may have actually worked against Le Pen. There has been a trend in global politics toward nationalism, first with Brexit, then President Trump's election. France could be where that trend comes to an end.
All right, look, this is for another time, but I think this analysis that what's behind Trump's success is nationalism, and that's all it is, and that's all that explains it, way misses the point. It's way too narrow a term to try to fit Trump into. Nationalism, populism, they're elements, of course, but you cannot, in this country, you cannot ignore that one of the key reasons people voted for Trump was to stop Hillary Clinton. The woman was resoundingly opposed by a vast majority of people outside the state of California. She wasn't even that popular in her own party, but it was stop her and stop the left. The people of this country who feel like they're losing it and that it's losing them blame the Democrats for it. So Trump got all kinds of support for different reasons, but they want to narrowcast or narrowly peg him as this nationalist because it's so small-minded and it's so dangerous. This America First stuff, that's not good, they want to say. So the attempt to link Le Pen to Trump is, and her loss is an appeal here, an attempt by Richard Engel and the others in the drive-bys to say, Trump's losing too. Trump's losing his popularity. Trump, and he's not. That's what they can't come to grips with. Now we go to Paris. And I was aided in my attempt to understand this by reading an extensive piece by Christopher Caldwell, who writes for the Weekly Standard. He's a senior editor there. He's written reflections on the revolution in Europe, immigration, Islam, and the West. And he found a pretty good source in Paris, actually in France, a man by the name of Christophe Jouy. And he describes himself as a geographer and a housing consultant. But he's also obviously adept at demography and political science as well. And he has been investigating the tumult in France in an attempt to explain it and write books about it. And at the heart of his investigation is globalization. What is the impact in France of globalization? He says that it has brought inequalities unseen for 100 years. that it is benefiting a few, but the few that it's benefiting are the wealthy upper middle class elites who are perfectly fine with it. The upheaval and the discord and the inequalities are happening everywhere else throughout French society. Demographic upheaval, cultural disruption, and now the French are having an election to, in part, decide what to do about it. The focus here by Mr. Jouy, the geographer and housing consultant, says that French society has been split in two by metropolization. In 16 dynamic urban areas, such as Paris and Lyon and Marseille, Bordeaux, Nice, the very well-to-do upper-crust elitist areas, the world's resources have proved a profitable complement to those found in France. These urban areas are home to all of France's educational and financial institutions, as well as almost all of its corporations and the many well-paying jobs that go with them. Also in these 16 dynamic urban areas are the people, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, the CEOs, the fashion designers, the models, the film directors, the chefs, and other symbolic success stories who shape the country's tastes from its opinions and renew its prestige. In other words, the picture of France that the world sees is shaped by the people who live in these 16 urban areas. The elites, and not all of them are ruling class in governmental sense, but they're benefiting fine and dandy from globalization. And they control the media, they control the entertainment, and they control, just as in the United States, the same people control the method of influence over popular culture. But globalization has had no such effect on the rest of France. Cities that used to be as lively, although smaller, as lively and robust and economically successful as Paris, and these cities that way for hundreds of years, are now deserts. They have been abandoned. They are haunted by empty storefronts and blighted downtowns. Think of it as the Rust Belt. You've got 16 cities in France that are doing fine and dandy. They are the cultural and media corporate headquarters that determine popular culture and opinion, journalism. The rest of the country is essentially forgotten and a Rust Belt. It used to be thriving, but it isn't any longer. And this man attributes the primary impacts of globalization for this current circumstance. But it gets more pronounced than that, because these people who've been displaced, who have been left out, have been replaced by people that are taken care of and provided for with much greater care and energy than native French. And these are immigrants, largely Muslim. Anyway, let's break there. I will continue. Won't take long to go through this, and you'll love it, I guarantee. Back in just a second here. We are back, and we are analyzing France and what the recent election there means and how it's similar to the United States. It's probably safe to say if the French had something like an electoral college, Marine Le Pen would win. But they don't. They're not a constitutional republic. They're not a representative republic. They're a quasi-parliamentarian democracy, and it's a different circumstance than ours. Anyway, Christophe Jouy, the demographer or geographer, says that he doubts that any place exists in the new economy in France for working people as we've understood them. These would be waiters, waitresses, people that work in department stores, any type of retail level work. These jobs just don't exist. the city of Paris has become like London or New York and San Francisco. You have two groups of people that live there, millionaires and immigrants. And then you throw the tourists and students in there. There's no room, for example, in Paris for the median Frenchman economically. The French working class cannot work in Paris because they can't afford to live there. So they have been forced to leave not just Paris, but other urban areas. Immigration explains why. While economic opportunities for native median Frenchmen are lacking in Paris, they are also prospering for others. In other words, somebody's taking the jobs that native French working class people aren't taking because they can't afford to live there. Remember, the people taking the jobs live in public housing now. Journalists and politicians assume that the stratification of France's big cities is a result of a glitch in the workings of globalization. In other words, globalization, it's kind of like communism. It's perfect. We just haven't had the right people do it yet. Globalization is actually flawless. There's just a little glitch here because we just haven't quite perfected it. But that isn't the problem. The rich parts of France have failed to have what they're doing translate to everybody. It's still only working for a select few and not outside the cities at all. And fixing the problem involves coming up with a shortcut. Like, the globalists say, well, we just need free Wi-Fi, and that will make this working class more competitive, and it will raise their incomes. Do you hear that here? You hear, we need to get free Wi-Fi. We need to give this service or that service to the poor or disadvantaged, and that will launch them to a new economic strategy. They're saying the same thing in France. But he doesn't expect that if it ever happened to make a difference. It's a campaign thing. It's people use it to get elected, but it wouldn't really make any difference in changing the economic disintegration that is taking place. Again, in the mid-20th century, the French built 5 million public housing units, which now accounts for a sixth of all households. Public housing is 1/6 of all households in France. It's hideous looking, but it's more or less affordable. But its purpose has changed. It does not house native French workers for whom it was built. It now houses millions and millions of immigrants from North Africa who began to arrive in the 1960s. Between 2001 and 2011, the population of white Londoners, for example, fell by 600,000. And the current rate is happening in France as well. So where are those people going? Where are they going to work, and who are they voting for? And that's what the election really has turned out to be about. Okay, just a couple more short little bits from this story, what's going on in France, that I find fascinating and interesting, and then we move on to other things that are still happening out there. So don't go away, folks. We're coming right back. Having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. It's Rush Limbaugh executing assigned host duties flawlessly. Zero mistakes. You know why? Because I do the assigning. And I don't assign myself stuff that I don't know or that I'm not good at. It's that simple. I am the business. I am the company. And it's great to have you here. 800-282-2882. If you want to be on the program, the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. Look, folks, the way to EIB.us. That's right, .us. Sorry. lrushbo@eibnet.us is the email address. The comment that I made about the Electoral College in France, what happens in the cities, the 16 largest urban areas, led, of course, by Paris, run the country. The people that don't live in the cities don't have a voice. They do in elections, but without the Electoral College, they have no strength, and they don't have an Electoral College. It's an amazing comparison in that regard. The big cities, Paris, Lyon, Marseille, which is the French crime capital, at least according to a TV show that I saw, it's called Marseille. And with Gerard Depardieu. You like that show? You watch that show on Netflix? Gerard Depardieu, and he's the mayor of Marseille. Yeah. At any rate, the point is, those cities now dictate to the rest of the country politically, culturally. It would be in this country as though if New York or San Francisco say what is, that's the way it's going to be in Wichita. Because there is no mechanism like we have here in the Electoral College, which actually promotes a greater and wider array of democratic representation. At any rate, the two remaining, to me, quite interesting aspects of this. So we've described here circumstance in France, which is almost parallel to the United States. Globalism and the shrinkage of Paris as a nation state and primarily as a member of the global union. The people who benefit from that are those who live in the cities. They're doing very well. They're doing quite well. These are the people that hire gardeners and pool people and household staff and so forth. These are the people that basically have enough money to have employees themselves, nannies, things like this. But the people being hired for those jobs are not French. They're immigrants, because in the cities, it's too expensive for working class French people to live. They don't earn enough money to even afford to be able to live there. So they have to go out into smaller cities and rural areas in France. They have been replaced by immigrants. And it's not whether it's illegal or not, it's just immigrants. And the vast majority are Muslims. And the vast majority of those don't have any living expense problems because they now live in all the public housing, which is 1/6 of all housing in France. Now, you might think that a situation like this would bother the French elites. Just like you might think that in America, the plight of middle-class working people in America would bother and concern the Democrat Party. But you would be wrong. They don't care. The Democrat Party decided to get rid of the white working class as a member of its coalition because they didn't want to have to appeal to them. These are people that want to work. These are the people that want to be upwardly mobile. The Democrat Party's not interested in that. They're interested in a coalition of minorities that are willing to be dependents. And that's the way the Democrat Party here has rolled the dice. And in France, the elites have done much the same thing. French elites, this is what fascinated me, according to this researcher, Christophe Jouy. French elites have convinced themselves that their social supremacy, I mean, they know they're in the big clique. They know that they're the top dogs. And they have convinced themselves that that upper class status, that supremacy, has nothing to do with their economic strength. But instead, it's because they think they are good people. They think they are decent people. They're not racists, and they're not bigots, and they're not sexists, and they're not homophobes. They are decent people. They don't think, according to this guy, that their might, that their power, that their social standing has anything to do with the amount of money they have. The reason for this, according to Monsieur Jussuy, is that doing so allows these elites to present the losers of globalization as embittered people who have problems with diversity. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, you people that are opposed to illegal immigration, you're a bunch of racists. You're xenophobes. You're misogynists. You're all this stuff. You're bitter clingers. And who is it that gets to describe you this way? Why, the elites of New York and Washington and San Francisco and Los Angeles, they get to describe you this way. And they set themselves apart because their status in life has nothing to do with the money they have. They're better people than you. And it's the same identical circumstance in France. The elites believing that what sets them apart from everybody else in the country is that they're better human beings allows them to present the losers, the economic losers, as angry people who have problems with diversity. In other words, these elites in France say it's not our privilege that the French deplorables resent. It's the color of some of our employees' skin. So what they claim, people like this Macron guy and others of his ilk, what they claim is that people voting for Le Pen resent the fact that the elites are hiring people of color and minorities instead of them. And that makes it possible for them to categorize them as racists and bigots and what have you. French elites have a very colorful vocabulary for those who resist the open society. One need not say anything racist or hateful to be denounced as a member of the white xenophobic France or even as a fascist. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You just have to not be in the elites. You just have to be middle income or poorer. If you express any discontent with the political system, you are cast as a white xenophobe in France. The circumstances are just so closely parallel here. And it's just an illustration that liberalism, socialism, wherever you find it, is identical. And it has its arguments, it has its strategic lexicon for how it separates and divides people. And it is hideous. And, of course, Le Pen is the equivalent of Trump, which means that she's a reprobate and absolutely horrible. And this is where that election is. And she got within 2 points of the guy. It's assumed he's going to win this in a slam dunk in the next round on May the 7th.